struggle with how to get participation, so I apologize for the passing of the cards. But we did have one brave soul who passed a card. Is to will we be coordinating wildlife crossings of barriers like freeways, and looking at barriers also to pedestrian traffic? And the answer is yes. That we have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory group at SACOG who's delving into these issues right now. And we heard about this today. Also, the Caltrans recently did a habitat connectivity project, which will be a central part of our environmental analysis for the MTP. So now we have a short, one more question. What incentives are planned for the TPAs besides CEQA streamlining? CEQA streamlining is what we have right now, and maybe Casey Lazan knows if there are other incentives that we have in our portfolio, but it's really working with our members to say what can we offer in those, and that's really one of the outcomes of this integrated planning process, is we may not know about an economic development strategy that's already in place in a transit priority area, and so by starting this integrated planning process, we can uncover that and uncover those incentives, and so I think the participation of this whole group is going to be really valuable as we go through this process. Are the TPAs identified yet? The answer is no, because we're still in the process. So those of you who participated in the MTP workshops, you gave us input on 3 scenarios. And so we're still in the process of refining your input, and Casey will cover that in her presentation in a few minutes here, to see what type of transportation system is going to come out of that effort. In the transit priority areas are, of course, centered on the transit system. So where we put that transit investment, where we see the need for 15-minute service is a transit priority area. And so that will be unveiled in, we're expecting the April workshop, maybe a little bit sooner, but you will be some of the first to know if you stay informed on this project when those transit priority areas are under consideration by our board. Okay, and why don't we take a couple of questions after Casey's presentation. We're going to just show the short MTP video that many of you have seen, some of you have seen before. And I will cue that up.
What does it take to keep the roads and transit system functioning for our existing population? As our region is expected to grow by over 1 million people in the next 24 years, what will it take to expand our current system to meet our region's growing needs? These are some of the questions facing our region and SACOG, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for our 6-county and 22-city region, as we plan for the next update. Representatives from cities, counties, and SACOG are listening to what you have to say.
And again, that video was for the workshops that some of you attended. But we have today with us Casey Lazan, the MTP project manager, who's going to carry you through what happened in those workshops and what we found out from you, from many of you in the workshop series. So we are continuing to collect questions as we go throughout the day. So keep those coming, and we'll address some of those after Casey's presentation.
Okay. Okay, I have this one. How do the metrics consider transportation safety, particularly safety of walking and bicycling, including the walking trip to transit? So up until this point, we haven't had any sort of safety metric or been able to look at collisions at all. For this update, we're currently we're testing out a new software. Maybe this isn't the answer you wanted, but we have to be able to measure that and use data to do that. So we're looking at federal software and state databases to be able to do that this time around. So hope that answers you.
We're trying to get into the right person as you're handing the questions in as well.
And one of the questions we have here is the environmental justice focus discussed today new to the MTP process. And the answer is yes. The information that Chris presented is new to the process. You saw some of our past indicators looking at access, but we're really looking to go beyond that in this planning process.
A question about the nature of the grant and the term funding for modeling tool development. And that's very much what will happen in the context of this work, is that in the modeling that SACOG does to provide information and decision-making tools to local governments, we will now be able to add this information to those modeling tools. So there was a question about will there be other resources through HUD to help with those modeling tools, and that is very much what we'll be using these resources for.
Question back?
Hi, just had a question about your outreach plan in order for diverse communities to participate. You guys plan on setting hours and meeting locations and that kind of thing? Translated.
Yes, it is, and when we get down to the community level planning, we're actually going to have targeted outreach and also work with a mini grant process so that local community groups that are really on the ground once the indicators are developed, and this is our first outreach to those who might have a bit more expertise, but we don't want it to feel exclusive of anybody who's new to this process, but we did want to start this first launch with some of those audiences that represent underrepresented groups but have a little bit higher context to what we're doing regionally. But when we get down to the transit priority planning areas, we're going to do a mini grant application so that we can engage communities with familiar faces and trusted leaders.
And so a couple more questions. One is, will these indicators be updated annually for use by our member jurisdictions so that they can monitor their plans? And that's a great idea. I think some of them might be able to. What we have planned as SACOG is we could update them in our planning cycle, but we welcome the partnership for how we develop a smarter planning process to update these indicators to develop what we're pattern after the City Sacramento Livability Index. Another question was, have we considered measures of how well a community provides housing and transportation for low-paid workers that live in the community? And really, those are some of the tools that we want to develop with you through this process, looking at that jobs housing fit analysis and looking at how we do that. Did I get the question?
You got the question wrong. You got my last question wrong, too.
Okay.
That it's not workers who live in that community because they may currently be unable to live in the community due to the costs of housing in the community. So it's looking at, does this community provide housing for the people who work there? And if not, maybe we need a map that shows, oh, this community is red because the people who work there can't live there.
Yes, and we are looking into some of the new products from the Census Bureau to see if we can identify where that is happening in our region. And so one of the challenges we're facing throughout this program is they changed the census on us after 100 years. And so we're all struggling with how do we deal with this new census that doesn't have a long form anymore. But we're looking for you to help us with that process.
We have a few questions that are related to the relationship between SACOG and our member jurisdictions that are cities and counties in the 6-county region. So I think maybe I'll take a step at that. And we have some of those member jurisdictions in the room. And I invite any of you to stand up and help me with this. We have one of our board members from Rancho Cordova as well. What SACOG does is takes data, maps it, and tries to build tools that member jurisdictions can use to do scenario tests on types of development or transportation or land use issues within their jurisdiction. So we have no authority over the local land use decisions, but we build information for our cities and counties to use as they would like on their own general plan and project approval process, which includes planning commissions and art commissions and all other types of cultural commissions and all of those things. So it's not to say that they're not part of this process, but we will not be in any way through this process developing an action plan that supersedes their authority to consider inclusionary zoning or other housing zoning policies, or where parks are located, or some threshold for green space. We do have the responsibility as an agency that's authorized by the state to allocate how much affordable housing should be located in each jurisdiction in our region, and in certain quartiles to match with certain income groups. And so we work with them on a methodology to say you need to preserve this much land use for affordable housing. And this process will even further help them understand how to match the scale of housing they need for the types of jobs that they either have in their community or close to their community, so that when we're building transportation infrastructure, we're really thinking about the system that needs to be in place to make the shortest possible trips between jobs and housing, housing and school, housing and medical services. Part of what we study is not just unique needs based on cultural differences or ethnicity or concentrations of certain demographic groups, whether it's based on income or age. But two things we do know that is going to happen over the course of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan that we're working on is that the number of people in our region will continue to expand, even though the growth is somewhat slower. But the look of our population is about to change pretty drastically. In addition to becoming more diverse, we're going to have a huge number of people that are over 65, and a huge number of people who are in their between 20 and I want to say 33. Thank you. So as you can see, that really changes the look of our land use patterns over the last 20 years, where we were thinking a lot about young single people or people with 2.2 children. Okay, we're not likely to have quite a bigger block of families or households that are more traditional 2 parents and 2 children if a huge segment of our population is going to be both younger and older. And I think there's a lot of learning and cross purposes that we can meet, because both of those age groups will not be at their full earning potential. So in addition to just economically disadvantaged people in our community, we talk a lot about affordable housing today, we're not just talking about people that we might unfortunately stereotype as people who are underserved or in need, but really the changing need of our entire community. Young people who haven't reached their full career, or seniors who are retired, or just, we don't really know what the new economy is going to look like. And so will we still be in a place where we have a lot of families or homes with 2 incomes? This is about building a toolbox that's for all of the residents of all of our communities going forward, and making sure we're prepared for what the future might hold. We can only provide the information to the jurisdictions, but without giving you a number, and I know that Cynthia can't give you that number, it was a very competitive process, and I can tell you that I heard that number, and we competed extremely well in this country, and it's largely because of all the assets that are in this room coming together to tackle these issues. You're still sitting here and not one person fell asleep, and we came at it for 2 hours, and I think that's amazing. So I'm going to give you a round of applause. Many of you know me, and I've been doing engagement for about 20 years. I started in the legislature, and I've worked for a school district, and I've worked for a local jurisdiction. So I tend to be part of our agency that's responsible for translating very technical and complex information, and I see my predecessor Ken Huff out there in the audience. We don't typically provide you this much content, ask you to process it, and then ask you to apply it to your stakeholder interests. So I think it's too much for us to expect today for you to comment, but I'm sure you're curious, how are we going to use your input after spending 2 hours talking to you and not much time listening. So I would like to ask you to please email us your thoughts as you sort of absorb everything that you've heard today, because it will help us shape the message for people who we still need to engage, and make sure that we're effective in how we move through the next topic areas. So please do email us your questions, the questions we could not answer today. We will work into content for that website, so in about a week, if you could visit it, you might see some explanations and some new information, or at least a little bit more understanding of the process. I did promise you I would explain what would happen next. So we will meet again on March the 30th, and the topic will be health and equity and access in our communities. And we will start to gather comments on the equity measures. We are building towards something over the next 2 or 3 meetings that will be you helping us identify what the criteria should be for selecting a focused number of transportation priority areas for us to work on collectively over the rest of the grant. So on April